So due diligence has been significantly impacted by the Wayfair decision. Prior to the Wayfair decision, due diligence, from my experience, really centered around federal and international tax issues. Sales tax was considered, but from my days back in a Big Four firm, it was often last minute. And if it was done, oftentimes it was done by income tax professionals, not sales tax professionals. Since Wayfair, sales tax has become significantly more important, right? Everybody knows how Wayfair has impacted the sales and use tax space. And nowhere is that more important or visible than in the due diligence space around merger and acquisition activity. Because it's so much easier to obtain nexus now in light of all the economic nexus provisions. Sales tax issues around due diligence have taken on significant more importance. However, what I'm seeing in practice is that it's still not always done by sales tax professionals. Lots of times, these M&A teams that come in are still just managed and led by income tax professionals. So the due diligence still has a lot of the same assumptions and caveats. And what that does oftentimes is that it overstates the liabilities that are out there and the exposures that are out there. These teams are just taking swags at what exposures and liabilities there might be. I had one client about a year ago that engaged Clarus Partners to help almost get a better estimate of what the exposures were that came from a due diligence report. They were a client that was bought by private equity, and the private equity firm had a top tier or a top 10 accounting firm come in and do the due diligence, the tax due diligence. And in that, the firm just almost made the assumption that my client was a SaaS provider, software as a service, and felt like they had significant exposures in 7-figure range across the various states in which they had nexus. Actually, it turned out to be 4 states. And the buyer of the company was holding that money back in escrow because they felt they had these exposures. They hired me to come in. We did our nexus study, that same process of doing the nexus study and then the exposure analysis and then transitioning that into a conversation about due diligence and what the picture looks like going forward. We had a conversation with them based on all the research we did, and ultimately the company had zero exposure, truly zero. They did not sell SaaS. None of the products or services they sold were taxable in any of the states in which they had nexus, truly any state, honestly. So as a result, we worked with that top 10 accounting firm by providing the technical write-up that we had done based on all of our research and findings. And essentially they agreed. They said, yeah, you're right. We don't have that exposure. And as a result, the CEO of the company was able to get the rest of her money from the acquisition. So it was a win-win for everybody. The point here is be proactive around your long-term future. When you're thinking about the opportunity to sell your company, don't simply rely on the buyer's due diligence team. They're oftentimes not staffed with sales tax experts that have been doing this day in and day out for decades. Get somebody on your side that has the experience to provide you with the insight into what exposures you may or may not have. And at that point, you're better armed and prepared during that due diligence process.